Lucille Ball was 90 seconds away from the biggest mistake of her career. The cameras were rolling. 300 people were watching from a studio audience. Millions more were tuned in from home. October 14th, 1962. Everything was perfect. The jokes were landing. The timing was flawless. And then Lucille Ball heard something that made her stop breathing. 2 words. Just 2 words spoken quietly near the back of the soundstage. But those 2 words carried 400 years of hatred in them. And in that moment, Lucy made a decision that terrified everyone in the room. She stopped the show. Not during the commercial break. Not after they wrapped for the day. Right there. Live. In front of everyone. The studio executives went pale. The sponsors started calculating losses. The director whispered desperately into his headset. But Lucille Ball did not move. She just stood there under the hot studio lights, staring at a young woman in the shadows. A woman whose hands were shaking. A woman who was trying desperately not to cry. What happened in the next 11 minutes was never supposed to see the light of day. The network buried the footage. The sponsors demanded every witness sign confidentiality agreements. For 60 years, this story stayed hidden. But here is what makes this moment impossible to forget. The person who spoke those hateful words was not some random stranger off the street. It was someone powerful. Someone Lucy had personally invited into her studio. Someone who thought money made them untouchable. And the young woman who heard those words? She was not just another employee. She was carrying a secret that would change everything. A secret that even Lucy did not know yet. What Lucille Ball did in those 11 minutes did not just stop a television show. It stopped time itself. And what she said next became the most powerful words ever spoken on that soundstage. Words that would echo for generations. Words that prove courage is not about being fearless. It is about being terrified and speaking anyway. It was a cool October morning at Desilu Studios in Hollywood. The air inside Stage 9 smelled like hairspray and fresh paint. Lucille Ball walked onto the set at exactly 7:45 a.m., wearing a crisp white blouse and navy slacks. She was 51 years old and untouchable. She was not just the star of the Lucy Show. She owned the entire studio. Desilu Productions, the largest independent television production company in America. She was the first woman in history to run a major Hollywood studio. And everyone who worked there knew it. Among the crew that morning was a 23-year-old woman named Clara Bennett. Clara worked in the costume department. She was one of only 3 black employees at Desilu Studios. Every morning, she took 2 buses and a streetcar from Watts just to get there. It took her 90 minutes each way. Clara had been working at the studio for 8 months. She was quiet. She was precise. She kept her head down and her hands busy. She had learned very young that invisibility was survival. But Clara was carrying something heavy that morning. Something she had not told anyone. 3 days earlier, she had received a letter. A letter that changed everything she thought she knew about her own life. That letter was folded inside her jacket pocket right now. She kept touching it to make sure it was still there. Also present that morning was a man named Richard Pemberton. He was 46 years old. Senior Vice President of Hartwell Cigarettes. Hartwell sponsored the Lucy Show to the tune of $3 million a year. Richard had flown in from Philadelphia specifically to watch the production. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Clara made in 3 months. His gold cufflinks caught the studio lights every time he moved. Richard represented power. In 1962, sponsors did not just fund shows. They controlled them. And Richard Pemberton knew exactly how much power he had. The morning rehearsal went flawlessly. Lucy hit every mark. Every joke landed perfectly. The crew moved like a machine. At 10:15 a.m., the director called for a 15-minute break before they would film live with the studio audience. Clara was organizing costume pieces on a rack near the back corner of the soundstage. She had her back turned. She did not see Richard Pemberton walking toward her, but someone else did. Richard Pemberton walked past Clara Bennett like she was furniture. Then he stopped. He turned around and looked at her. Really looked at her. Up and down. Slowly. His expression was not curiosity. It was something else. Something that made Clara's stomach tighten. He leaned toward his assistant, a nervous young man named Peter, and said something under his breath. But the soundstage had gone quiet during the break. Voices carried farther than people realized. And the words Richard spoke were not whispered quietly enough. He used a word that had been used to strip dignity from Black Americans for centuries. Then he laughed. A short, cruel laugh. And he added, "I still cannot believe they are letting these people work backstage now. What is next? Putting them in front of the camera?" Peter's face went red. He looked down at his shoes and said nothing. Clara stood frozen. Her hands gripped the metal costume rack so tightly that her knuckles went white. She had heard that word before. Many times. On street corners. In stores. Whispered behind her back on the streetcar. But hearing it here, in this place where she worked so hard to belong, it felt different. It felt like a door slamming shut. She blinked hard. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of anyone. But one tear escaped anyway. It rolled down her cheek before she could stop it. 20 feet away, Lucille Ball was reviewing script notes with the director. She had been laughing about a line change. But then the soundstage went quiet. And in that quiet, Richard's voice carried like a stone thrown through glass. Lucy's head snapped up. Her blue eyes locked onto Richard Pemberton. Then they moved. Slowly, deliberately, to Clara. Clara, who was standing completely still. Clara, who was trying to make herself disappear. Clara, who had just wiped a tear from her face and was pretending it never happened. The director noticed the shift immediately. "Lucy, everything all right? We need to start in 5 minutes." Lucy did not answer. She was watching Clara, watching her shrink, watching her try to become invisible. Lucy set down her script. She removed the pearl earrings she was wearing for the scene. She straightened her shoulders. The crew members who had worked with her for years recognized what was happening. Lucy was about to do something. The director tried again. His voice was quieter now, almost pleading. "Lucy, the audience is seated. The cameras are ready. We are live in 5 minutes." Lucy turned to him. Her voice was calm, dangerously calm. "Then they can wait." She began walking toward Richard Pemberton. Her heels clicked against the studio floor. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Every single person on that soundstage stopped moving. The hammering stopped. The shuffling stopped. Even the crew members adjusting lights froze in place. Richard saw her coming. His confident smile flickered. Just for a second. "Miss Ball," he said smoothly. "What a pleasure. I was just telling Peter here how impressed I am with your operation. Truly first class." Lucy stopped directly in front of him. When she spoke, her voice could have frozen fire. "I heard every word you just said. Every single word. And now you are going to hear from me." Richard's face went from confident to confused to pale in 3 seconds flat. "Miss Ball, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding. I was simply having a private conversation with my assistant about—" Lucy cut him off. Her voice was sharp as a blade. "Stop talking." The 2 words echoed across the soundstage. "You do not get to explain this away. You do not get to call it a misunderstanding. You said exactly what you meant, and I heard exactly what you said, and now everyone else is going to hear it too." She turned away from Richard. She faced the entire crew. Over 70 people. Grips, camera operators, lighting technicians, sound engineers, costume assistants, all of them staring. "Everyone," Lucy said loudly, "I need your attention right now." The soundstage went dead silent. You could hear the hum of the overhead lights. "This man," she pointed directly at Richard Pemberton, "just used a racial slur to describe one of our crew members. He called her a word I will not repeat. Then he said he cannot believe we let people like her work here. He questioned whether she even belongs in this building." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a clipboard. The sound of it hitting the floor was like a gunshot. Clara stood frozen near the costume rack. Her eyes were wide. Her hand was covering her mouth. Richard stepped forward. His face flushed red now, anger replacing his shock. "Now you wait just 1 minute, Miss Ball. I represent Hartwell Cigarettes. We spend $3 million a year sponsoring this program. $3 million. I cannot just what?" Lucy stepped closer to him, close enough that he had to look down at her. But somehow she seemed taller. I cannot defend my employees. I cannot call out hatred when I hear it. I cannot risk your precious advertising dollars for something that actually matters. Her voice rose with each question. This was not Lucy Ricardo. This was not the silly redhead who got stuck in freezers and stomped grapes. This was Lucille Ball, the woman who clawed her way out of poverty, the woman who was told she had no talent, the woman who built an empire anyway, and she was done playing nice. Let me tell you something about money, Mr. Pemberton. Her voice dropped low. Deadly. I grew up poor. Dirt poor. I wore hand-me-down clothes and went to bed hungry more nights than I can count. I have been fired. I have been bankrupt. I have been told I would never make it in this town. She paused. Let the silence hang. But I have never, not once, not ever, stayed silent when someone was treated as less than human. Not for $3 million. Not for $30 million. Not for anything. She walked past Richard, walked directly to Clara. Clara was trembling, tears streaming down her face now. Lucy reached out and gently took Clara's hand. This is Clara Bennett, Lucy said to the entire room. Her voice was softer now, but somehow even more powerful. She has worked in our costume department for 8 months. She arrives at 6 in the morning and leaves at 8 at night. She takes 2 buses and a streetcar to get here. 3 hours of travel every single day. She has never once been late. She has never once complained. Not about the hours. Not about the pay. Not about the fact that she makes half what the other costume assistants make for doing the exact same work. Lucy's voice cracked slightly. Just slightly. And do you know why she has never complained? Because men like you have taught her that her voice does not matter. That her pain does not count. That she should be grateful just to be allowed through the door. She turned back to Richard. Her eyes were blazing now. Well, I am here to tell you something. Her voice matters. Her pain counts. And she is not here because I allowed her to be here. She is here because she earned it. Every single day. She earned it. The crew stood in stunned silence. Some were nodding. Some had tears running down their faces. Richard straightened his tie. His hands were shaking, but he was trying to regain control, trying to find his footing. Miss Ball, he said. His voice was quieter now, but still defiant. I think you are being emotional. This is business. Perhaps we should step into your office and discuss this privately, like adults. Lucy smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who had just made a decision. The smile of a woman who was about to burn everything down. This is the moment everything changes, Lucy said. Keep watching because what I do next is going to shock every single person in this room. She looked at the audience seated in the bleachers, at the cameras, at the crew. And if this story is hitting you right in the heart, if you believe that silence in the face of hatred is betrayal, then subscribe and turn on notifications. Because stories like this need to be told, and they need to be remembered. Lucy turned back to Richard Pemberton. Her smile was gone now. No, she said firmly. We're not going to discuss this privately. Because hatred grows in private, Mr. Pemberton. It thrives in whispers, in closed-door meetings, in polite conversations where everyone pretends not to notice. That ends today. She released Clara's hand and walked to the center of the soundstage, right under the brightest lights, where every single person could see her, where the cameras could capture every word. I am going to give you a choice, Lucy said. Right here, right now, in front of all these witnesses. Richard crossed his arms over his chest. And what choice would that be? His voice was defensive, guarded. You can apologize, Lucy said. Not to me. To her. To Clara. You can look her in the eyes and acknowledge that she is a human being who deserves respect. You can tell her that what you said was wrong. And then you can stay. You can watch us film this episode. You can see what real talent looks like. She paused. Let the option hang in the air. Or, Lucy continued, you can leave. You can take your $3 million and walk out that door right now. But if you do, I will call every newspaper in Los Angeles tonight. I will call the New York Times. I will call every reporter who has ever interviewed me. And by tomorrow morning, every single person in this country will know exactly why Hartwell Cigarettes is no longer sponsoring this show. Because I will make sure they know. The room went completely silent. Richard's assistant Peter had turned white as paper. The power had shifted, and everyone could feel it. Then something happened that nobody expected. Clara Bennett stepped forward. Her voice was quiet, but it was steady. "Miss Ball," she said, "may I say something?" Lucy turned to her. Her expression softened immediately. "Of course, Clara. This is your moment. Say whatever you need to say." Clara turned to face Richard Pemberton. Her hands were shaking, but her eyes were clear. "Mr. Pemberton," she began, "I have been called that word my whole life. By strangers on the street, by people who did not know my name, by people who never once looked at me long enough to see me as a person." She took a deep breath. "I could hate you for what you said. Part of me does. Part of me wants to watch you lose everything. Your job, your reputation, everything." Tears were rolling down faces throughout the studio. Even the hardened crew members. Even the grips who had seen everything. "But hate is exhausting, Mr. Pemberton," Clara continued. "And I have carried enough weight in my life. I have carried the weight of being invisible, of being less than, of being afraid every single day that someone will remind me I do not belong." Her voice grew stronger. "So I am going to choose something different. I am going to choose to believe that people can learn, that hearts can change, that tomorrow does not have to look like yesterday." She looked directly into his eyes. "The question is not whether I can forgive you, Mr. Pemberton. The question is whether you can change. Can you?" The silence that followed lasted exactly 11 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Every person in that studio held their breath. The cameras had stopped recording. The audience sat frozen. Even the air seemed to stop moving. And then Richard Pemberton did something no one saw coming. His shoulders dropped. The defensive posture crumbled. The arrogance that had carried him through 2 decades of boardrooms and business deals melted away. He looked at Clara. Really looked at her. Not a category. Not at a color. At a person. His eyes filled with tears. His hands trembled. "I am sorry." His voice cracked. Broke completely. "I am so sorry, Miss Bennett. What I said was unforgivable. There is no excuse. There is no explanation that makes it acceptable." Richard took a shaky breath. He looked down at his expensive shoes, then back up at Clara. "I was raised to think a certain way," he said quietly. "My father spoke like that. My grandfather spoke like that. I grew up believing it was normal, that it was just how things were, that some people were worth more than others." His voice was barely audible now. "But standing here, looking at you, seeing the strength in your eyes after what I said to you, I realize how deeply wrong I was. I realize how much pain those words carry, how much damage they cause." He turned to Lucy. "Miss Ball, I understand if you want me to leave. I understand if you never want to see me again. But if you will allow it, I would like to stay. Not as a sponsor, not as a businessman. I would like to stay as someone who needs to learn, someone who needs to be better than I was 20 minutes ago." Lucy did not answer. Instead, she looked at Clara. "This is your decision, Clara, not mine. He hurt you. You get to decide what happens next." The weight of that moment settled on Clara's shoulders. The entire room was watching her, waiting. The man who had dehumanized her was asking for a chance. She had every right to say no, every right to watch him walk out that door. Clara studied Richard's face for a long moment. She saw the tears. She saw the shame. And beneath all of that, she saw something else. Something fragile. Something real. Remorse. She nodded slowly. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow," she said. "That is what I believe. That is what my mama taught me before she passed. Stay, Mr. Pemberton. But do not just watch what happens here today. See it. Really see it. Let it change you." The tension broke. Someone in the back of the soundstage started clapping. Then another person. Then another. Within seconds, the entire crew was applauding. Some were crying. Some were embracing. Lucy walked to Clara and wrapped her in a tight hug. She whispered into her ear, so only Clara could hear, "You just showed more courage than I ever could. You chose grace when you had every right to choose anger. That is real strength. Clara smiled through her tears. Someone had to teach him, Miss Ball. Hate never taught anyone anything worth knowing. What happened in the weeks and months after that day is the most powerful part of the story. But first, if this message of choosing grace over hatred resonates with you, leave a comment below. Tell me about a time you chose forgiveness when anger would have been easier. I read every single comment. The episode they filmed that day never aired. The network buried it. But what happened next changed Hollywood forever. Within 3 months, Lucille Ball promoted Clara Bennett to head costume designer. She became the first black woman to hold that position at any major television studio in America. Clara stayed at Desilu Studios for 22 years. Richard Pemberton returned to Philadelphia a different man. He personally restructured hiring practices at Hartwell Cigarettes. He brought in the company's first black executives in 1963, something that was unheard of at the time. Richard and Clara exchanged letters every month until he died in 1987. Years later, a journalist asked Lucille Ball about that day. Lucy said, "I did not stop the show to be a hero. I stopped it because staying silent would have cost me something more valuable than any sponsorship deal. It would have cost me my humanity." When asked if she had any regrets, Lucy shook her head. "My only regret is that it took hatred being spoken out loud before love found its voice. We should not wait for darkness to arrive before we turn on the light." Lucille Ball stopped her live show for 11 minutes, but the lesson from that day has echoed for over 60 years. She did not just become a legend that day. She became proof that courage plus compassion can transform the world. One moment at a time, one choice at a time, forever. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories that prove humanity's capacity to change. And remember, the next time you witness injustice, you have the same choice Lucy made: silence or courage. The world is waiting to see what you will choose.